What's good, everybody? I'm Keandre, this is Intellect, and welcome back to the channel. A lot has happened since the last one, and we're currently in the stage of getting those postponed games back into the schedule, so things are heating up. Now, I wanted to highlight a few of those outside the top 60 because I do feel like there are a lot of players, even into the 70s, who have a great chance of getting drafted and being on this board at some point, or being major players in 2023. So starting with that, Murray State's Tevin Brown is a big time potential sleeper candidate as a shooter first and exciting offensive talent at the guard spot. Florida State's John Butler is one of those guys that probably won't declare, which is why I haven't included him in the top 60. He's like 7 foot 190 and is still super raw, but I think he's got eventual lottery to top 20 potential. We still have the rest of those young guys who I like long term, but I'm sort of juggling whether or not to include them if I think they'll return. But I also want to talk about some others, so it's kind of a developing thing. Players like Matthew Meyer, Javon Quinterly, Isaiah Mosley, Kobe Jones, Jamari Bouye, those and a few others are still very much in the picture. Now getting into the top 60. The older brother to the likely rookie of the year in Evan, Isaiah Mobley has a great skill set himself. He's got defensive versatility, he can shoot it, score inside, he's passing and handling it at a really high level this year, and I just think at the very worst he'll be a priority undrafted pickup that gets himself into a better situation if for some reason he's not picked in the second round. You look at a guy with the skill set and physical attributes Orlando Robinson out of Fresno State has, and it's hard not to like him. He's a fluid 7-footer who can shoot the three, scores inside in a variety of ways, and can even handle it a bit. I've only gotten to watch a handful of his games, but he might be a late riser. Coming into the year, I was very high on Mike Miles. He didn't get off to the best start, and that 3-game stretch from OU to Iowa State was definitely not kind to him, but it's hard to deny his talent, and you can just look at the games against the big dogs of Baylor and LSU. The splits may not be friendly, but he's got the makings of an NBA guard, especially with the passing improvements. Before unfortunately getting COVID, Johnny Juzang didn't miss a beat after UCLA didn't play for nearly a month, still getting his 20 nightly, knocking down threes at a higher clip, and of course scoring the ball off the bounce. Now, I've got some concerns about his burst and more importantly defensively, but I think there's room for him in the league. The dude can really shoot it and score the pill. Jabari Walker is a guy who has a very good chance of carving out a career as a defensive-oriented forward or big wing. I don't want to limit him completely, but you see guys like Dorian Finney-Smith, Kessler Edwards, Robert Covington, and think that's something Jabari could definitely replicate in some way in the league. Caleb Love has struggled from the field over the last month, and his decision making has turned to do it myself a bit too much, but he's continued to hit the three at a high rate, especially off the bounce, and he's getting to the line at a level that felt impossible at times last year, keeping points on the board. I still have confidence in him in the second, but it hasn't been trending in the best direction.
Watch out, here comes Love.
I just really like the energy and athleticism Keon Ellis brings to the floor, and he's definitely a constant threat defensively. He's improved enough as a shooter for me to consider him draftable, but he's got to get some consistency down the stretch and maybe a couple higher point totals to catch people's eye and solidify him in the second. Arkansas's Jalen Williams has caught my eye as a versatile big with a lot of the required skills in the modern game. He's got good size, he's a good athlete, he can defend in space, and make passes as a roll man. He's also got good feel on both ends. He happens to be a great charge taker for him to make more noise here soon. And that was tier 6. Darion Sebron is basically a 3-point shot away from being a potential early second, maybe even late first type of guy. I know that's not happening this year or overnight, but when you look at how good he is at getting to the rack and putting pressure on a defense, playmaking at his size, it screams obvious NBA guy. There have been some very encouraging games for Peyton Watson lately, and I'm glad he's finally getting the minutes to at least help a UCLA team that can actually use his abilities as a 6'8 defender and athlete first and foremost. The offense hasn't been much but flashes so far, but the top 20 potential in next year's draft and draftability this year is still there to me. Italian guard Matteo Spaniolo has a ton of appeal as a shot creating guard who also does damage in the pick and roll. He's super crafty, has good size, and has put up consistent numbers in the LBA Serie A. He's still got some decision making stuff to work on, but it's actually been a lot better from what I've seen in his latest stuff. Italy's coming through in a big way in this class, and Gabriel Procida is one of the reasons why. A shooter first, Procida is knocked down from deep as a 6'5", 6'6", 2 guard. He's crafty, and the flashes he's shown off the dribble are serious. I'm looking forward to watching even more of him, but I like him sort of in his general range right now. VCU's Vince Williams Jr. has really caught fire lately, and I think he's playing himself into serious draft contention. I think the Herb Jones success is actually going to help him as a 6'6", 6'7" guy who plays 1 through 4, might not be Herb on defense, but defends at a very high level and has been a very consistent shooter over the last 2 seasons on high volume. And to be honest, he might be the biggest sleeper still out there. Before a couple down games a few weeks ago, Youngjoon Lee's production was basically a model of consistency. He's going to give you 15 to 20 points a night, hit about 3 to 4 threes, cut and set up screens at a high level. He'll struggle defensively at times, but he's always going to compete. I think he's got the makings of a Doug McDermott type of guy in the league if he can get that defense up to par. Even though he's rarely done anything offensively, I still have faith in Ousmane Dieng as sort of a project pick. He's continued to be really good defensively, which is really positive for a player as young as him in a professional league, and the playmaking flashes are there, but everything's too few and far between for me to go much higher than this right now. I think big man Michael Foster is overlooked on this Ignite team. He does really need to improve defensively everywhere outside of the paint, and the shot selection can waver, but when you look at an 18-year-old big who has his level of touch and shot making ability, he's someone I'd consider in the top 40 for sure.
Now Foster on the back down, all muscle.
Travion Williams is the best passing big man in college. I think he's someone that if he ends up in the right spot could make a big time impact in the league. He's got a very good offensive skill set, he can defend, and even through what's been a slump from the field lately, I still like his game, and I definitely like to see him in the NBA. After having a super rough patch for basically all of December, Justin Lewis has been on fire, lighting up the Big East and sparking a huge win streak, including wins over Villanova and Providence in there. At 6'7", 230 plus, his offensive skill set has been on full display, and while I've got some questions about him defensively, some of the turnovers, and whether or not he can produce like this consistently, he's somewhere in the second round for me. Mid-major or not, Jordan Hall has continued to be one of the most interesting all-around prospects, one of the better passers at 6'8", and even though I've got some concerns about his ability to consistently create advantages off the bounce and getting to the rack, he always makes a positive impact and figures things out, and I'm looking forward to seeing him in an NBA setting. The best way to describe Jaime Jaquez is just good at basketball. It may not show up in the box score every night, but he's always making timely and smart plays. He's going to have to knock down the 3 in the league, and like I've said in the past, just add more wing skills, but if and when he does, I think he can crack a rotation. I'll probably keep talking about how much better Christian Koloko has been this year until he gets drafted. He's part of this really nice center class, and his ability to run the floor at that size, block shots, rebound, is going to put him somewhere in that conversation with the Williams, Kamagate, Kessler bigs. Iverson Molinar is one of the best offensive guards in the country. I mean, when your name's Iverson, you gotta be. And for that reason, I think he's a top 45-ish type of player. He'll probably shoot it better down the stretch and get that percentage somewhere in the middle from where it was last year. If you want an idea of who he is, just watch the Alabama or Kentucky games. That'll sum it up pretty well. Caleb Houston has made real progress over this last month or so, especially as a shooter and scorer before the Nebraska performance. Defensively, he's been better as well. I still don't see him as much more than an early second type of guy who could really shine in the right situation, but he's eliminated what was becoming pretty concerning. Moussa Diabate is still one of the more underrated potential one-and-done freshmen to me. You got a lot of what you want out of a modern 4 or 5 man with his athleticism, versatility, and untapped face-up game. It's probably likely we see him at Michigan again, but I am clamoring to see him in a situation that's not already dominated by Hunter Dickinson. I think I bought into Hugo Besson just a little too much early on. Now I do think he's a late first, early second type of guy as a highly skilled offensive talent, but there are some others I like a little more explaining his drop. This Breakers team can be a tough watch, but they've at least got some recent W's. Here's a quick look back at Tier 5. While also sort of lofty, the young Boris Diaw comparison is sitting right there for Harrison Ingram. I do still have some questions about his game, but he's going to have a lot of first round buzz, likely in some established situations in need of a do-it-all forward. And if you need a look at the best of him, go ahead and watch that upset against USC.
For the Cardinal, and Ingram with a left.
Wendell Moore has come back to earth a little from what was an unbelievable start, but I'm still confident in what he brings as sort of a power guard or smaller wing who does a lot of things well. He's continued to shoot the ball at a high rate for most of the season, which is encouraging. The decision making has been a bit questionable at times the last month, but in general, he's got an appealing game. I went back to see how Alondes Williams made the transition from role player at OU to star at Wake Forest, and I really think a lot of it was opportunity based. You look at those games against Baylor and Gonzaga last year, and you can see the makings of the player he is now. I think he's someone who should get first round consideration for his all-around ability and especially significant playmaking as a 6'5", sneaky, explosive guard or wing.
One of the best players in the country.
I feel like it only made sense to give the bigs in this class a bump, and Walker Kessler is one of the reasons why. That man is averaging 4 blocks a game, he moves really well at 7'1", he's played a huge part in Auburn becoming the #1 team in the country. The idea of him re-adding the 3 to his game makes him even more interesting. KU's Christian Braun has proven himself to be one of the best players on the short list of best teams in the country. His versatility and ability to affect the game in multiple ways, especially defensively, make him a potential late first round pick. I think the one thing we're still waiting on from him is a 3-point shot, which is still a long-term thing, but all things considered, he's becoming solidified. Julian Champagnie has struggled from the floor lately, but I like him as one of the most talented scorers at 6'8". The first game he had coming back from COVID, he went for 34, 16, and 3 blocks on 12 for 22 from the floor. He's made improvements in other areas of his game that keep him a late first, early second type of guy. I've been super impressed with Duke's Mark Williams. He's continued to show that he's one of the best shot blockers in the country, boasting a 7'7" wingspan. He's a rim runner, lob threat, and a very good athlete. I've had some questions about him in the past, but this dude we've seen over the last month is an absolutely viable first round pick, no doubt about it. Ishmael Kamagate is continuing to make his case as the best non-Durant center in the class. You can watch him and immediately see the rim running and defensive potential, but his abilities as a passer and flashes as a future shooter might be the separator. Trevor Keels went down with a calf injury against Florida State. Luckily, it wasn't as serious as it looked, but he missed several games before returning against Notre Dame. Keels' ability to defend, shoot it, and make plays was an evident missing component while he was out. And as for his NBA prospects, he might take a dive in the eyes of consensus, but I still think he's a first-round prospect. I do like Kennedy Chandler's game, I'm just not 100% sold on him becoming like a top guard in the league. Tennessee's offense has been a pretty tough watch. I do think he'll benefit from playing with NBA talent, but his ultimate ceiling at about 6'1" is different than the Garland and Trey group, but still a step above from like Aaron Holiday had coming out. I think EJ Liddell is one of the most underrated players in the entire draft. He's a unique forward with a great offensive skill set and the ability to take over a game on both ends. There aren't too many guys you're going to see giving you 20 points, 40% from 3, and nearly 3 blocks a game. And that second half performance against Purdue was all toughness after what was a really rough first. He's a first round guy in my eyes. I wouldn't be opposed to a second year of JD Davison at Alabama, though I'd guess he'll probably leave. Part of his inconsistency has come with trying to find where he fits in with guys like Quinterly and Shackelford, but he's still got a lot to work on in the half court offensively. When you're that athletic and have some of the games that he's had, it's hard not to keep him in first round combos. Luckily for Jean Montero, he had a pretty good track record prior to joining Overtime Elite, because we're not learning much from this experience. His performance against Amon Thompson was interesting because it was the first time I've really seen him struggle, and Amon is a future top 10 pick. But everything surrounding the program feels like more of a show than a developmental basketball environment, and the competition isn't great for those you want to market as future professionals. With so much distance from the actual draft process, it's a bit of a guessing game with him. As I expected, Max Christie has started to really find his rhythm offensively, and it's a night and day contrast from the beginning of the year. He's had some rougher games in between, but it's where he's getting his shots and the confidence that I've been really pleased to see. Now, he does still strike me as a player who would like to spend another year in college for him to feel ready being a pro, but if he decides to declare, he should be a top 20-ish type of pick. There are very few players in this class who have the scoring potential of Bryce McGowens. At 6'7" with a great possibility to fill out in the future, McGowens has showcased a lot even though the full splits aren't friendly to him. He's been heading in the right direction as a shooter, especially over these last 4 games. He gets to the line with regularity, he's tough, and I think he'll be a late riser if he keeps it up.
McGowens drives, there it is.
That was Tier 4. there should be a lot of movement both up and down from this big group of players. Tari Eason has become one of the most consistent guys in college and an automatic first round pick. I think his combination of size, versatility, and defensive prowess is too strong not to be. And then you have plenty of flashes of his upside as a driver and ball handler offensively. The 3-point shot is going to be a work in progress, but he's been a great surprise this year and yet another Pacific Northwest guy that's league bound. Notre Dame's Blake Wesley has had a few struggles lately, but I like his offensive skill set that's pretty reminiscent of Karis LeVert. The thing that separates him just a little for me right now, while it isn't a particular strength of his game, is on defense and some of the passing flashes. I feel like those two areas give him an advantage over Bryce McGowan's for me right now, and it has him in potential lotto talks if he can bounce back from the field here soon. I still think Kendall Brown is an easy potential top 20 player and even lottery in the right situation, but I don't think it's this foregone top 7 conclusion that has sort of swept everyone away. He's got terrific feel for the game, is bouncier than most trampolines allow, and has tons of defensive potential, but I think he's a little more raw on both ends than discussed. I like Jeremy Sohan as Baylor's best prospect. I just think his defensive versatility and footwork at 6'9", 230, and the more projectable offensive role as a 4-man, and someone who has flashed some serious scoring upside gives him the edge. He's definitely got some things to work on in terms of feel and patience, but I love what he brings to the table. Ignite's Dyson Daniels has impressed me over the course of the season. I wasn't so sure in the beginning, but I really think he can contribute in the league at a high level. As a 6'6" guard or wing who defends, he can pass it, and has made improvements getting to the bucket and being aggressive. He's got to work on the handle and the 3-point shot, but at 18 already being an all-around high-impact guy is great. Kansas hasn't had a draft prospect like Ochai Agbaji in a minute. He's become one of the best and most consistent scorers in the country, which has been exactly what I've wanted to see from him times 10. He's put on the show, and I'd consider him in the teens as an athletic sharpshooting 2 guard who defends and fits with any team. Another guy who's had his ups and downs and hasn't even played since January 5th, which might be good for his stock, is Patrick Baldwin Jr. It's going to be difficult for me to not have him as a lottery pick, considering what we've seen from him in the past, and even still, you're not finding many guys in the country at 6'9" who can play like he did in that Robert Morris game. He's aiming for a return from his calf injury next week, so hopefully we can see him on the court again soon. Nikola Jovic has only played like 3 games since we last did a board, but I've consistently come away impressed by his potential as a shot creator and overall offensive talent at a listed 6'10". He's still only 18, and I think he'll be considered in the latter half of the lottery and into the teens. There aren't too many prospects who have the silky smooth flashes he does, especially in a league that's consistently competitive. Marjon Beauchamp continues to be an excellent story coming out of the Ignite program. We of course talked about him in that first look video, but to reiterate, he's just a super consistent threat on the wing who's always finding ways to affect the game, and I know he has more to offer from an individual offense perspective. I think he's a guy who can just make an instant impact. There's a very high possibility that we see a handful of these guys end up ranked higher than some of those in the back end of the next tier. I'm confident Jalen Duren will remain the #1 center in the class, though that gap is a little different than it has been, and you just look at the physical tools at his age, what he can do defensively, the flashes of playmaking and shooting excellence, and have to come away impressed on the macro scale, even though he's had some game-to-game struggles in a strange situation. He's missed the last couple games with a hand injury, but he should be back soon. Bringing up the Ignite video again, Jaden Hardy is going to be one of the most interesting prospects to watch. I'm still holding confident in his talent level offensively, but it's the decision making and feel that I'm looking at most over anything going forward. Defensively, he's outperformed expectations and he's had some passing flashes, but I want to see it all come together just a little more, especially in a game that he doesn't shoot it well.
Many good players in the NBA G League. Hardy, tricky.
Keegan Murray has continued to impress me this season. He's the modern 4 or hybrid wing if he can improve the guard skills a bit more, and he's shown some important flashes as a creator and jump shooter against higher level competition. I never thought he'd become this consistent of a scorer, so shouts out to him for taking the reins of the opportunity and putting in the work. He's continuing to look like a late lotto guy for me. Arizona's Ben Mathurin has been a model for consistency for a team that has been depleting most of their Pac-12 competition en route to being one of the best teams in the country. The raw numbers haven't been there as much, but Matherin's still one of the best wings in the class, and someone I think has a lot of easy room for growth as a creator and defender. Ty Washington kind of reminds me of pre-draft Tyrese Halliburton. He might not have the best burst or be super athletic, but he's good at basketball. There's no better way to describe him. He's smart, makes good decisions, can defend, and he's shown some encouraging signs as a self-creator. We'll see how he looks down the stretch coming back from that ankle injury, but I'd still give him a few games before he's closer to being right. Johnny Davis has really solidified himself as a top 10 and really a top 7 guy over the last month or so. I believe I uploaded the last board on the day he went for 37 against Ivy and Purdue. I just love his motor, his toughness, and the motivation he has to make things happen. We'll have these games where he starts off shooting poorly, or maybe he even shoots it poorly for most of the game, but it never stops him from making an impact and doing what his team needs. I do think you could say there's some questions about his space creation and maybe reliance on strength, but I felt somewhat similarly about Chris Duarte last year, and it hasn't really mattered. Now, I didn't technically include Shaedon Sharpe in the top 60 because I just wanted to keep that spot available, but should he declare for the draft, though he joined Kentucky at semester, I think he'd be roughly in my top 6 or 7, but definitely in this area. Now, the plan seems to be for him to play at Kentucky next year, and he'd still have to impress in team workouts if he doesn't get to show anything at UK this season, but his talent as a 6'5", 6'6" athletic shooting guard who can really score and has a pretty well-rounded game is definitely enticing. If he decides he wants that year in college, I don't blame him. He'll probably still be a top 10 pick in a more loaded draft and rack up the NIL money while he's at it. Now, I'm pretty close to being sold on this next group being the top 5 of this class, and this is the closest race for the number 1 pick I think we've seen since 2014 with Wiggins, Jabari, and Embiid. I would say there's a little separation with the top 3 from the other 2, but I haven't come to a conclusion, and this next guy we're about to talk about, it always feels like I should have him higher. AJ Griffin has pretty much stamped himself as a top 10 pick even by the most skeptical. You see the knockdown shooting ability, the potential to create offense for himself at a very high level, the defensive upside. It's just hard for me to think that the 6'7" athletic wing who could legitimately be in the 2022 high school class isn't going to have serious top 5 consideration and possibly even higher than that if the medicals check out. We can go numbers for numbers, but he's still not even that involved in this Duke offense, and I really don't think we've even scratched the surface with his game. Having limited practice coming back from injury, Jaden Ivey has come off the bench over the last couple games and still been that guy. I think he's the top guard in the class, and his set of tools as an elite athlete give him a ridiculous ceiling. Now, he's far from a finished product, but I think you look at the things he does that no one in this class can, and you continue adding pace and nuance to it, free him from the Big Ten and put him in great positions, there's a lot to work with there. That game winner against Ohio State was another one of those moments the top players always have, and I'm excited to see the rest of his season. Chet Holmgren has put on a spectacular display over the last month. The scoring is up, the efficiency is going to break calculators galore, and he's improved on basically everything I talked about in his first look video. While I do still have a couple players ahead of him at the moment, I change my mind frequently because they're all so good and so unique. The only 2 concerns you can really point to with Chet are weight and strength, and some stuff about him individually offensively. Other than that, he does check a lot of boxes, so it's a tough decision. It's been this way for a minute now, but Jabari Smith Jr. will be in serious contention for the number 1 pick, and he's even some people's runaway for that spot now. I don't know if I've ever seen a 4-man who can consistently shoot the 3 like this or hit contested middies, combined with the fact that he's a very good perimeter defender on what might be the best team in the country. He bounced back after having what was his first really poor shooting game against Mizzou, and though not without some flaws, he's the most seamless fit for any team at the top of the draft. But Paolo is still the number 1 guy for me. I know the popular pick has become Jabari, which I really don't have a big problem with considering what we just described, but I think what Paolo brings has started to get taken for granted a little bit. There is no other player in this class at that size who can attack the bucket, score in the post, consistently make plays for others, and of course you've got the dribble pull-up game and ability to run a pick and roll. He's also not without some definite flaws, but I've still got him first in the tight race. Here is a recap of the entire 60-man board. that's gonna do it for this one. Be on the lookout for a mock draft coming soon and a lot of other content as well. We're getting closer to March, so you know the quantity of videos is definitely going to go up. But that's all I've got for this one. I appreciate y'all for watching the video. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and comment down below some of your thoughts. I'm Keandre, this is Hoop Intellect, and I'm out.
Life ain't sweet, Saturday through Monday, but in the summertime, you my watermelon Sunday.
Gotta beat the heat, even though I wanna play, but you keep me cool, you my watermelon Sunday.